coming. I'm Rosemary Thomas, and this is the second in the series that the Auxiliary is putting on, the second of the speaker series. You may remember our first speaker was Chief Monroe, who did the AED demonstration, and I want to thank the Auxiliary for purchasing a brand new state-of-the-art AED machine after that presentation. So thank you very much. Today, I want to also thank Jan O'Malley, who spoke to Carol and got Carol in this adventure in the first place, and for helping set up everything, and also Cliff, who helped set up all the chairs and everything today. So, you know, we're a working club, so we don't have people that we can snap our fingers and do things. We have to do things ourselves. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'd like to introduce to you the Executive Director of the Educational Foundation Sailing Program, and also Vice Commodore of Marathon Yacht Club. This is Carol Shattuck. And Carol is going to talk about the adventures with her family over the last few years. So it should be great. Carol, thank you very much for doing this.
Hi, my name is Carol Shattuck. I am a cruiser. I did not circumnavigate, but I did cruise the world for almost 3 years. So a little bit of background, it was almost 42 years ago that I cruised. My father was in the military for 31 years. He retired from the military. He was in the Air Force, and he decided that he was going to buy a boat and sail around the world, which everybody kept saying, "Are you sure your dad wasn't in the Navy?" But he was a navigator, so that's where my trust came from when we were using sextants to cross the ocean, because I knew I had faith in him as a navigator in the Air Force. Anyway, he decided to sail around the world, so he bought a 42-foot sailboat, a Passport 42. It was built in Taiwan, and I think he was hull number 7. He took delivery of hull number 7. Retrofitted the boat, and we took off from San Francisco on December 7th of 1983. Let's see if, that was our departure date.
Nice.
So, we started out in San Francisco. We went down through the Panama Canal, all the way up to Nova Scotia, over to the Azores. We did 2 transatlantic crossings, and we spent a year and a half in the Mediterranean. And that's what comprised of our 3 years of sailing. When we came back, we worked our way from Barbados all the way up the chain, Lesser Antilles and the Bahamas chains, to complete our 3-year trip. So, the boat name. Boat name was Deadream. There's the Deadream, front right. How did you get your name? Captain James Cook, his 4 boats, the Discovery, Adventure, Resolution, and the Endeavor. My father was a big fan of James Cook, and he came up with the boat name. So it was always a story to tell, because everybody, oh, is that an Irish name? You know, where did that name come from? So that's the story we had to tell. There's my mother and father. My father was 50 years old, and my mother was 49 years old when they started this adventure. I was 23. There's the boat under sail. And there's, you can see all the teak and everything, and laundry on the line. Anyway, here's our departure day. There's our crew. When we started out, it was me, my mother, and my father. I have 5 siblings. None of them went because the older ones were getting married, having kids, and the younger ones were, you know, just graduating or in college or graduating from high school, wanted nothing to do with my parents. I had graduated from college. I was working for 2 years. I decided I didn't like to work, and I was watching my parents plan this trip. I was living in California, we were living in San Jose, and I decided I wanted to get to Boston because most of our relatives and everybody that we knew lived in Boston. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm gonna jump on the boat with Mom and Dad, just get around to Boston, and then I'm gonna jump ship, get a job. So I told my parents at their boat christening, when I'd been drinking a lot of champagne, sure, I'll go on the trip with you. The next morning I woke up and I'm like, what the hell did I just do? So I did quit my job and I moved onto the boat and we started planning the trip. There's the crew. So my dad invited 2 of his really good friends. I started sailing out. If you look at the very front of the boat, hi, come on in and sit down.
Doctor's appointment.
See this little blue dinghy up there? That's what I learned to sail on. It's an El Toro. So when you're new cruisers, you really don't know what to take, and you kind of offload a lot of stuff along the way. But we took a hard dinghy with us and oars, and that was our dinghy that we had. So Bill Robinson and the guy who was taking the picture, Jerry Myers, they came along with us because my mother and I didn't have much experience sailing on this big boat. In fact, we had none. Come on in. So Jerry was my watch partner, and Bill was my mom's watch partner. And the way that our watches worked is you did 3 on, 6 off, always under rotation. There was always somebody at the helm. The helm was never unmanned. The only time it wasn't manned is when you went down and did your ship's log entry. Every hour we had to do a ship's log entry. And it was, I wish I had them. I thought I had them, but it was a big long entry. You had to record the barometer, the exact time that you were putting your entry in, the wind direction, the wind speed. You had to do everything. And as part of that, if you were to fall overboard, there was going to be a record of the last entry that they would know what to go back to. So this was a standard procedure, never failed, never changed. It was always, and we always had to have a harness on when we were up on deck. And when you had the harness on, you couldn't unclip yourself from the harness until you had gone down the companionway. So we had a pretty long lanyard, so you could unclip, enter your ship's log, clip back up, and go back up topside, for the rest of your watch. The other thing about the watch is the rotation. It allowed you to, every 3rd day, you were back on that same schedule. So you weren't always on the same time, like noon to 3. Every 3rd day you had that noon to 3, so you weren't always on the sunrise watch, the sunset watch, which was good because there were certain watches that you really hated. So it allowed a change. There's my mom and dad having the champagne, and they had popped that bottle of champagne as we were going under the Golden Gate Bridge. And that was our last channel marker that we saw before we hit the high seas. So we went down the East Coast, or we went down the West Coast from San Francisco to San Diego. We got stuck in San Diego because we had some engine problems. And so we spent Christmas in San Diego, which was good. Got the engine fixed, and then we left and went to Cabo San Lucas. Finally hit the warm weather, take our sweatshirts off. And then from Cabo San Lucas, we went Acapulco, Mazatlan, Puerto Vallarta. And then from there, we went to, we left Mexico and we avoided Guatemala, El Salvador, because it was all trouble. 40 years ago, they had the Condonista rebels and everything, so you avoided those countries like the plague. So we went into Costa Rica, spent some time in Costa Rica, had turtle stew, because you could eat turtle in Costa Rica. We tied up to the Chiquita banana plantation. That's where you filled with diesel and water, and but we stayed in there in Punta Arenas for probably a week or 2, and then from there we went straight to the Panama Canal. We did transit the canal. It was still owned by the U.S. when we transited the Panama Canal, so it was very friendly. When you get your report time, they pair you off with a tanker. So you're going into the locks with a tanker. When you're going up, the tanker is in front of you. And when they fire up their engines to head into the next lock, so you don't release your lines, you stay secure until they move forward and then you move forward. The other thing about the Panama Canal is you have to hire a captain to take you through. So they're at your helm, so even if my dad was the captain of our boat, he was not at the helm the entire time. You also have to hire 4 linesmen to work your lines, and you have to have a nice lunch prepared for the captain, because he won't come on your boat, because that's the one thing that they ask you. Not only do you have to pay him a certain fee, but what are you serving for lunch? So, and my mom had already heard about this, so she had lobster salad sandwiches. The other thing they have is, as you're going, you know, we went from the Panama side to the Cologne side, and when we got to the Cologne side, well, as people go back and forth, they have these tires, car tires or truck tires, and they put them in plastic bags, big hefty plastic bags with lines to tie off, and you just get somebody else's tires. So you're trading tires, and when you get to the other side, you're getting your tires to the next sailboat that's gonna transit through. Because these walls are greasy, gross, slimy, and your boat is moving. So you wanna make sure your boat is protected all the way around. So we had these tires secured all the way around the boat. That's our going up, part of our going up transit. That's the locks. I think going up, you're not going up as high, but when you go down, you're dropping a lot. That was our captain, and that's going down. You can see how it drops a lot and that's when we're in front of the tanker. This was our crew that we went through the canal. And this, when I was up on when it was still before they let the water out, I was up on the side, and this guy, the Panamanian guy, was teaching me how to throw a bowline. Instead of just tying one, he taught me how to throw it, whip it, pull it through. So I guess my dad or someone got a picture of that. So there's always interesting things that happen while you're engaged in all of these places. So from Panama, we went up to the Yucatan. So we went to Cozumel, Isla Mujeres, and then from there, Florida, all the way up to Nova Scotia, across to the Azores, and then to Portugal. So when we were, story to tell, when we were, we left Panama, and we were heading to the Yucatan, and we had to pass by this tiny little island, Isla Providencia. And the chart that we had was it was a spot on the chart. So we just knew we had to avoid it. So my mom was on watch, and my dad said, keep it to port, stay off the island about 5 miles. Not a problem. So she's staying off of it. Here's the island, but we're heading this way. Well, what the chart that we had didn't show is there's 10 miles of reef that expand north of it. So my dad and I are down below sleeping, and all of a sudden, crunch. I get thrown from, I never slept forward because there was too much motion, and I got sick one time sleeping forward. So I was sleeping on the settee, and I got thrown from the settee and immediately ran up the companionway. And my mom was freaking out. She's like, I don't know what's going on. And my dad was like, we're in a reef. So we downed all the sails. He fired up the engine, and I was up forward watching the phosphorescence go over the rocks and telling my dad. We had actually gotten in pretty far into the reef because it took over an hour to get out, and we were still hitting as we were coming out. The next morning, we stopped the boat. My dad went over the side, and all night long we had to do bilge watch to make sure no water was coming in. So, and then the next morning, my dad, went over the side and looked, and there was just a little gouge along the keel, but nothing, no damage. So we were good on that one, but still, it was not an experience that I ever want to repeat. Anyway, then we went in to Cozumel, Isla Mujeres, Cancun, had a good time there. Went over to the Keys, went up to Miami, staying in Miami Marine, which is beautiful. And then we left and we were going up the Intercoastal. And there was a bridge. And we had to leave outside of Fort Lauderdale because there's a fixed bridge that we couldn't get under. So we came back in and there was another bridge and half of it didn't open, it was broken. So we were going under it, it opened up, we were going under it, the engine stalled as we were going under. So the boat went to the side, the spreader and the shroud caught the bridge and it ripped the spreader off. And so we were stuck in the Intercoastal. So we were right near Fort Pierce. We went to a marina in Fort Pierce and we tied up, and as soon as we tied up, I'm like, I'm going to the bar. I'm out of here. I didn't want to hear Dad, you know. So I went to a bar and lo and behold, I meet some welders. And they said, actually we had gone up the mast to take the spreader off. So, and the spreader had actually torn. So they said, we can weld that for you. So I got home that night or back to the boat that night, and I told my dad, yeah, I met some welders. They said they'll be here at the boat tomorrow to pick the spreader and repair it for you. And I thought, but they're not gonna come. They came. They took it back to their shop, they welded it, they went up the mast and they installed it. So we leave, raise sails, and we're heading out, and then I look up and the two tongues that hold the spreader that got ripped, the welds on the mast had broken loose. So it was doing this up there. So back in the Intercoastal, we had to go all the way up. We had the mast stepped in Mystic, Connecticut. We went the Intercoastal all the way up to Mystic, Connecticut. So it was a long way. It was a beautiful trip though. We stopped everywhere. We got to see the blossoms, the cherry blossoms, and yeah. So it wasn't a bad trip. I'm not going to complain, but it would have been really nice to be under sail. So we ended up at Mystic for about 2 months, having all this work done. But all of my relatives lived in Massachusetts, so we went to visit them. And we kept coming back, to the boat and enjoying life. Then we already knew we were leaving late because the key time to leave, usually everybody leaves from Provincetown, Massachusetts. They head to Bermuda and then they go across. And they usually start doing that in June, no later than July. Well, it was already August. So we knew we were already late, the window had closed. So the next thing that you do is head north. So we went all the way up to Nova Scotia and took the northern passage down to the Azores. So that's why you see that star there. So here we are at the Azores. They're volcanic islands. Yes?
The star is the Azores?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that crossing took us 7 3/4 days.
That's all.
We had a beam reach, beautiful weather. We left Halifax, Nova Scotia in a fog, a dense fog. And all we kept doing was listening to the foghorns. And we were heading at them, and as soon as we saw that one, we'd listen to the next one in the distance and head towards that one. And again, we did not have GPS. We did not have sat-nav. Sat-nav was the big thing that people had. But it was $2,000 at that time. And 41 years ago, $2,000 was an expensive piece of equipment to get for your boat. So we didn't buy it. And the other reason that we didn't buy it is because my dad kept saying, there's something better coming along. There's something better coming along. So my dad, Air Force Colonel, his last command was working on the GPS Navstar system. It was a top secret program at the time, and he was responsible for, before he retired, he had already launched 4 of the 20-some satellites in orbit. So that's why he kept saying, we're not getting sat-nav, we're not getting sat-nav. And I kept, please Dad, please. So we had Loran C, and if anybody knows anything about Loran C, your charts have Loran lines on them, and you need 2 waypoints to triangulate your signal. So when you get down to Mexico, you're done. You are dead reckoning, or you're using celestial because there's no Loran towers in Mexico. And then Europe, they were spotty. Usually we didn't have enough of them to get good signal. and in the middle of the ocean, there was 0. So when we were coming across, that's where I learned how to do celestial and work a sextant with my dad. So he decided that I did better shots than him, and he was marking the time. So every day before we would do our shots, we did a morning, a noon, and a evening shot. And sometimes we would do star shots or moon shots. Moon shots were the worst because the closer it is to the earth, the further you can be from your, measurement. The farther away it is, the better off you are. So sun is always good, but stars were the best. If you could take a star to the horizon on a somewhat moon night, and it's hard to see, but if you could do that, you were going to get your best fidelity on where you are. So my dad felt that I was good at arcing it, and I would call Mark, and he'd do the time, and we would both take turns doing the calculations. The plotting I could never get. He always did all the plotting. But if you look at that chart over there, that's on that table, it shows the southern crossing that we did, and he's got it plotted out every day about the same time of every day to see our progress across the southern Atlantic. But anyway, when we got into the Azores, it was at the end of the day, and the harbor that we were going to go into, we didn't have a chart for. So he said, we're not going in. I'm like, what do you mean we're not going in? We've been in the ocean for 8 days. And he's like, we're not going in until tomorrow morning. And it's a good thing we didn't go in, because when we went in, this little harbor was not a harbor. It was rocky, and it held 2 boats, and at low tide, our boat was smacking on the top of a rock. So, only if there was waves, otherwise it was okay. But these islands they're gorgeous, and they're known for their whaling. So, and they still, the guys still at that time, I don't know if they do now, they still went out in their small boats and harpooned whales. They did not, do anything fancy. They didn't net them, but they harpooned them, and then they brought them here. This was in Pico, and it was the whale rendering plant, and every single piece of a whale is used. There's not one bit of it that they don't use. And then they're also, because they're volcanic, a lot of good flora, fauna. So from the Azores, then we went to the Algarve, Portugal. We sailed into Spain, and for Thanksgiving and Christmas, we sailed up the Guadalquivir to Seville. And there's a whole set of charts, I think it's these. And they just show, each chart is probably a mile of the river. That's the fidelity that they have in their charts. So we went up, all the way up, and we tied along the riverbank, and we spent probably about a month in Seville. Beautiful city. I met a bunch of college kids, exchange students that were going to school in Spain. So I had fun, never wanted to leave, so that's why my parents delayed, and okay, we'll stay a little bit longer. So that was a good highlight of the trip. We came down, we stayed in Rota, Spain, which is, there's an Air Force base there. So we stopped at, my dad being military, anytime that there was an Air Force base or any kind of military base, Oreo cookies, peanut butter, jelly, maple syrup, Bisquick. Those were, things that we would stock up on. So we were in Rota, and my dad said, we're going to Gibraltar tomorrow. Okay, so my dad went to clear out of Spain, and the harbor master said, you're coming back. He goes, I'll save we had a side tie to the quay, and he's like, I'll save your spot. And my dad's like, we're not coming back. And he's like, yeah, I'll see you in a few hours. So we get out there, because in the Mediterranean, the current is always going in. So you figure no matter what, you're gonna get sucked in, but a lot of times the wind is blowing out. So we were in probably 6-7 foot seas, which our boat can handle it, against the current, because the wind was opposite the current, so these were stacked waves, and all we kept doing was tacking. And all I kept looking at is that same rock. We're not tacking this way, Dad. We're still heading that same way. So after about 3 hours of trying it, we went back. My dad ate crow, and the harbor master said, "See, I saved your spot for you." And he said, "I'll tell you when you should leave." So about 2 days later, he came and knocked on the hall and he said, "Leave today." So we ended up motoring. We got sucked into the med. So listen to your harbor masters when they tell you what to do. Anyway, we went into Gibraltar, and when we got into Gibraltar, there was all these slips, and there was masts sticking up in the water. No boat, just masts. So that was my first question, and I'm like, "Oh, here's a slip." "No, Dad, there's a stick. There's a mast." So we finally found a slip. We pulled into a slip, and what we found out was there was a hurricane, a gale, and these people sink their boats because there's so much swirl in there and damage to boats that's what they do. They sink their boats, and they just air. So it's a common thing for these people to do that, which was really weird to us. It's like, let us know when this is going to happen so we can be gone. They sink their boats and bring them back up. I'm guessing a lot of them don't have engines on them anymore. They're just sailboats, so they just let them go down. And it may be that they're, live aboard situation where those boats don't go anywhere. But it was just, there was probably 3 or 4 boats that were sunk. And we were there long enough for them to bring them up. And it's like, oh, there's no moss on it. There's no nothing. But, maybe they take their vital, possessions off and bring them back. I don't know, but it was just weird. So then we went into Spain, worked our way through Spain, and the top red line was our return trip. The bottom red line is coming in, because again, I had told you we were late to get there, so it was already winter time as we're coming through, in spring, so we decided to stay south. And when we got to, I think it was Sardinia, we decided it was still too cold, so we went to Tunisia, Africa. We wintered for about 2 months in Tunisia. And on our way there, to go in there, the military police came out on their boat, and they wanted to board the boat. And they had their, M16s or whatever. And my mom, who speaks French, because Tunisia is a French-speaking country, she's like, no. And my dad got on the radio and called Coast Guard, because there's active Coast Guard boats, and he told them, they want to board our boat. We told them no, and they said, keep telling them no, and tell them you'll follow them into port. And we didn't have any contraband. We didn't even carry a gun. The only thing that we had was a flare gun. And my dad said, point it at their stomach and pull the trigger, and the flame from that thing is just as bad as a bullet. So, and that was, the one thing. But everybody had always told us, don't let anybody board your boat. I will follow you into port. You can board me then, but you can't board my boat. So that's what my mom was telling them. And they really wanted to board. And then she also told them, we've been in contact with the U.S. Coast Guard, and they are going to meet us. So that kind of made them back off a little bit, even though we didn't know where they were. They could have been 100 miles away. So they escorted us in. They did board the boat. They searched the boat, didn't find anything. They tore it apart because they were mad that we wouldn't let them board. But at the same time that they arrived, the U.S. Embassy was there. So the other thing about my dad being on a top secret program, everywhere we were, they knew. So when we were in Rhoda, the embassy showed up. And I can remember my dad was down below, and I'm like, this guy comes up and goes, we need to speak to Colonel Norman Michaud. And I'm like, he goes, I'm from the U.S. Embassy. So they knew. They were tracking him. It was nice to have, a little bit of protection there. So same thing in Tunisia. They knew. And they monitored the search. And then after that, we were fine. We stayed there for a while I got warm. When we left there, we went over to Greece. We went to had some friends that joined us throughout, my mom and dad's best friends. They joined us throughout this trip, anywhere that was good. So they joined us in Venice, and we sailed up the coast. We sailed back down the coast of Yugoslavia. Venice was my favorite city. That's why Venice is up here. That's Piazza San Marco. I don't know if that's the Bridge of Sighs, but I'll claim it. I know I do have a picture of it somewhere. There we are. That's my mom and dad's best friend. Bill, my dad, Sandy, and then my mom. So, and then, of course, when you're in Venice, you've got to go to the Venetian glass factory.
Oh, yes.
So, from there, when we left there, we went down the coast of Yugoslavia. And it was still Yugoslavia. My dad's heritage is from the Yugoslavia and the Ukraine. So he wanted to see it. Now, and Dubrovnik was another one of my favorite cities. It was a very medieval city. The roads are very narrow, and you can see the ruts of the old carts, in the cobblestone streets. But it got bombed. We were there before it got bombed. We were there before it was Bosnia, Herzegovina. We were there when it was all still Yugoslavia. So that's a lot of these charts that you see. Now, that map that I've been showing is a 1980s world map. So it's different than what you would see today. It's different than what these charts have. So, there's a lot of history, or a point in time that you experience that it changes. From there we went to Greece, and this is my aunt and uncle, my mom's sister joined us. And Santorini was one of my favorite islands. And this is the volcanic island that 3,600 years ago, it was, one of the most massive volcanic explosions. And it left this massive crater that's very deep. And that dock is the only dock that you can tie to. So if there's a cruise ship in there, well, actually cruise ships don't tie up to that dock. They use their GPS, I don't know, probably sat nav back then, to keep themselves positioned in the middle of the crater. But when you do tie up to that dock, you might have 10 boats side tied to you. So, and when you're side tied there, you can't say no to anybody who wants, because you can't anchor. It's 1,000 feet deep. So if somebody comes up to side tie to you, you let them side tie. Now when you leave, you have to make sure that there's somebody to take you kind of back out, and they take the lines and squeeze everybody back together. So, but everybody is always helping everybody out to get in and out, to side tie. But anyway, we went all the way up, and we had lunch up on top. And then up there's a guy that he was making and repairing fish nets. I thought that was really cool. So I took pictures of that. So then from there, from Greece, we did all the Greek islands. We went to Turkey. We went to Rhodes, and then we went over to Turkey. And then we sailed up the Turkish coast a little bit. A lot of times when we got to countries, we would also park the boat, and we would rent a car, and we would enjoy the inland or parts of the country that we couldn't get to. So we didn't want to sail up the Bosphorus to get to Istanbul, so we rented a car and we drove up there. There's my parents at the Hagia Sophia. Troy, we went to Troy. There's poppies. And the Temple of Apollo. There's a Temple of Apollo in every country in Europe. But this is the one in Turkey. And a lot of these, I don't know if they've changed, but 40 years ago, there was rubble that they would claim as a temple. And that's their antiquities and their historic sites. And it's like, this is it? How can you claim that that was a temple in some of these places? The other thing that I thought was really cool is we sailed through the Corinth Canal in Greece, up through Greece, and when you go through it, you come out the top side, and you come over to the boot of the heel of the boot of Italy. So that it's located there. You come up this way, and then as you come out down there, that's where you come up to the heel of the boot. It's kind of hard to see there, but from there, we went to Sicily. We went up through the Straits of Messina, and we went to Pompeii. We went to Rome. We did all of that. We went over to the Isle of Capri, and when we were leaving, and we were motoring because it was dead calm, and it was my watch, and I saw something floating in the water. And I said, "Hey Dad, I see something, floating. Can we go take a look and see what it is?" Because it was white and kind of big. And he came up and he looks. He's like, "Sure, what's that?" So unplugged the autopilot and we head over there. It was a windsurfer, a fully rigged windsurfer. So I don't know how to windsurf. Never windsurfed before. But so we pull this thing up on the boat and felt bad for the person who lost it or hoped that someone didn't lose their life, But anyway, we didn't know how to unrig it. So we just kind of strapped this thing down to the deck of the boat, and when we got to the next anchorage, threw it over the side, and I decided I'm gonna learn to windsurf. And for hours,
Oh my God.
I tried and tried, but I was young then, and I wasn't gonna give up, and I finally did master it. And come to find out that this was a high performance windsurfer.
Oh, no.
So when you stand on it, it starts to sink. So you really need to fill the sail and get going right away. Luckily I wasn't big, so it didn't sink very much, and like I said, I learned with a little help from some people. Because people kept coming up, and I'd start going way out, and someone would come with their dinghy. "Hey, you need a tow back?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then they'd try and give you a couple of pointers, and eventually you'd find somebody who really knew how to do it. And there was a couple of guys on a catamaran who came over, and they gave me some good pointers. So from there, we did the south coast of France, the French Riviera. We did some of the Italian Riviera. We did the French Riviera. We parked our boat in Saint-Tropez and rented a car. We went all over Europe. We went to Austria, Switzerland, all over, France. And then we came back along I don't even know the east coast of Spain. We'd already done the Spanish Riviera, so when we left, we came out. We went to Morocco, and then we came out and went to the Gran Canary Islands. There is where you set yourself up for your southern crossing. So that was all a year and a half in the Med.
Wow.
When we were over here, actually when we were at the Balearic Islands, off the coast of Spain, and that was before we went to Tunisia, the Dwight David Eisenhower was there, and a whole bunch of military, kids, and I met a couple of them. They met my dad, and they talked to the commander of the boat, and he was gonna give my dad a private tour of the boat, and it was all scheduled, and we got up that morning to go get our private tour of this, big aircraft carrier, and all of a sudden there's sirens going off on the boat, the blaring warnings. My dad's like, "That's not," and I said, "What is it?" He goes, "It's a recall." And he said, "Those kids have like 2 hours to be back on that boat because it's leaving port." And he's like, "We aren't getting our tour today." That was the day that Iran took the hostages. So because of that, when we were over here, we did not travel any further. So, because we were going to continue on, we were going to go to Jerusalem, do all that. We were going to go to the pyramids of Egypt, but we nixed all of that part of the Mediterranean because of those problems. So again, world power, world politics, current events play a big role in the path that you take. So I never have seen the pyramids of Egypt. It's a bucket list item. And I've never been to Jerusalem and the Holy Land, another bucket list item. Anyway, we came out to the Grand Canaries and we staged ourselves there, ready to make our southern passage, and then we left. So we came down towards the Cape Verdes, and we motored for 6 days at doldrums. And I think on that, my dad said we've got another 24 hours before we kill the engines, and we're just floating. So there were a couple times that we did kill the engine. We were, like way out here, and I asked my dad, can I go swimming? It's like, no, there's still a current pulling us. I said, then throw a milk jug with a line off the back, and I'll dive off the front, and if you have to, you can just fire up the engines and come back around and pick me up. But I was diving off the front, going down, and I would come up and grab that milk jug, and I'd haul myself in, just for nothing better to do. And all I kept thinking was, I am in the middle of nowhere, thousands of feet of water beneath me, and just enjoying life. We finally did catch the trades, and when we caught them, they were heavier than normal. So I think they were probably, usually when the trades start 12 to 15, we had 18 to 25. So, and and it was straight downwind too. So what we did is we went wing on wing. We raised another forestay, and we had our 150 Genoa and our 110 Genoa just wing on wing out there just pulling us. In the middle of the night, I heard this whoosh, rushing water sound. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I'm on, I'm not on watch, I'm on the settee. My mom's on watch again.
Oh no.
And I go upstairs, I'm like, Mom, what is that noise? She goes, what noise? And I'm like, I hear a rushing water noise, and I take the flashlight, and I'm like, we're missing a sail. And I look down in the water, and there it is. We're just dragging it. So the forestay that we had rigged snapped. And so we had to stall the boat, haul it in, and then after that we were no longer wing on wing. We were trying the best we can to keep from, doing all of that. But again, that chart over there shows the plots from the sextant that we took, and it was 19 days. 19 days and 1 hour. So we had a contest going on, the time. I think my dad won. But I was on watch when we were supposed to see Barbados. So I don't know why I kept thinking I was going to see it on the port side, and my dad's down below, and he's at the nav station the whole time, looking at his charts, and he's like, you see anything yet? And I'm like, nope, I'm not seeing anything. Never was looking this way. I was always just, I want to see land. It's been 19 days. And he's like, he kept saying, he goes, I can't believe you're not seeing anything. He comes out the companionway, and he just looks, he goes, Carolyn. And I turn around, I'm like, oh my God, we were passing it. I was so focused on, and we were really passing it. So it was like, tack, let's go. So we got there in 19 days, 1 hour, and there's another sailboat. They actually lived here in Marathon. Phil and Janet Snowberger. I don't know if anybody knew them, and I know they were members of this yacht club years ago, 40 years ago. But we beat them. We beat their time, and they were racers, and they had a racing sailboat. So he was really mad.
Is that from the time you left Spain, or?
From the Canary Islands.
Canary Islands.
Yeah, the Canary Islands. So it was just the overall time from the Canaries. We also did, in Barbados, we did the Mount Gay Rum Regatta. They were there too, and we beat them in the Rum Regatta. We beat them on it's like a 5-day race. First day you leave, I don't even know what town, Georgetown or something like that, and then you sail up the coast, and then they have a beach party the next day, and then you race a course up there, and then another beach party, and then the 5th day you race back. The first day we went and hired a crew member to help crew our boat. So we went to the skipper's meeting, and everybody was like, okay, anybody who needs crew, raise your hand. So my dad raised his hand, And all these guys were like, yeah, I'll sign up for crew. And my dad said, my wife is serving lobster salad sandwiches for lunch. And everybody came running. So, and he was like, you know, what do you know? How much do you know? So he ended up picking this guy up. And the reason that we won the first day is because there was a reef and that's close to the shore. And he told my dad, no, keep staying, you're gonna get a lift from the land. So everybody else tacked, they got pushed down, and we stayed on that tack. We got the lift, and we continued on up. So that's the reason that and my dad was like, if I hit this reef, he goes, oh, you'll still be able to have time to tack. He goes, but I'm telling you, you are gonna get a lift from the land, and we did. So we ended up not coming in first place overall, but we came in third, and we got a little mini keg of Mount Gay rum. So we had a keg party. So from there, we worked our way up the chain. We spent a lot of time in the British Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands. I got off the boat and went and did a boat delivery. I flew into Miami and helped deliver a boat back down. So I didn't get to go to Puerto Rico. And then I also got off the boat in the Virgin Islands, and they continued on up through the Bahamas. Then they went up to the Chesapeake to try and figure out where to live. Came back down, and they ended up in Punta Gorda and lived there for 40 years, 35 years. Anyway, so these, again, you can see the routes. I didn't totally circumnavigate, but I did a lot of cruising in 3 years' time. Let's see. So, I told you about the watches, I told you about the harnesses. The time when you're sailing, your 15% of your time is at sea and 85% of your time is at port. So you're having a lot of fun, it just takes a little while to get there. And a lot of times we would just do 40 to 60 mile days. A 60-mile day was a long day for us, morning to evening if we wanted to get to a destination. 40 miles was leisurely get up, have breakfast, we'll get there before the sun sets. And sometimes we would get into a port, you know, a lot of times you're med mooring, which there's a quay, you drop your hook, you back down, and you just tie off, and then you drop a little plank to get on and off your boat. Or you pick up a mooring. But sometimes we would get to a port, we hated it. You know, it's like, let's get out of here. This place is gross, it's dirty. Other places we'd get to, and usually our plan was, let's plan 4 to 5 days. But sometimes you would get there and you'd fall in love with it, and 3 to 4 weeks later, and it's like, we're not on anybody's schedule. We're on our own schedule, and if we're enjoying life, let's keep enjoying life. So, and then the other thing, because we didn't have GPS, this is what you had, charts. So everywhere we went, every country that we went into, when we first cleared port, you fly your yellow quarantine flag, and then you go clear with the harbor master, and my dad, where can I go buy charts? And he would go and buy charts. So there are charts here from every country we visited, and you know, every river we went up. Here's charts of Turkey. Charts this is the one, Rio Guadalquivir up to Seville, and like I said, if you look at those, there's not many miles on one chart. It might be 2 miles worth of navigation. There's Italy, this one is the Med, and he did chart some of, you know, the actual trip through the Med, and I think he finally just gave up and went to, you know, sections that you can read. And I also have, this is not the sextant that we used when we were on the boat. I think it's secured down, but this is a sextant that someone gave to my father, and my father gave to me. But it is a 50-year-old sextant. It has a lot of value to it. And one of these days I'll get out there and take some more shots and do some more calculations. And this time I'll learn how to plot. There's also, anybody can just look through this stuff. I'm going to leave it out. There are postcards from all over, everywhere that we went. Sometimes you'll see two because I probably have, oh, I'm gonna send this to grandma and I'm gonna, but anyway, there's postcards from everywhere. We did have some collections. I started a spoon collection. Don't know what happened to my spoons. My mom bought a bunch of beautiful linens everywhere that we went, because in Europe, linens are just, you know, the thing. So she had tablecloths from all over, and my sister and I went through them all, and I'm like, I remember these. She goes, you need to take them all, Carol. So they're still at my mom's house, or mom and dad's house, and I haven't brought them down here yet, but anyway, and there's also photo albums, and one, I took a lot of pictures. My parents, for my first Christmas on the boat, they bought me a really nice camera. So I went and bought a bunch of film, and little did I know, there's a difference between film. Some film is slide film, and 6 rolls of my film that I took pictures of in the middle of the trip are all slide pictures. I haven't gotten them converted. I still have the slides. I can do that one day. Questions?
Did you have any storms?
Yes. Yes. So, I think that we always sailed by the barometer. So we wouldn't leave port if the barometer was going down. But there's times when you're already starting a trip and the barometer is going down. So when we left to go to Greece, and it was supposed to be a 2 to 3 day sail, because we left, I think we left Sardinia and to head there. And I think it was because my aunt and uncle were coming to visit, so we had a need to get there by a certain time. So the barometer started going down, and for some reason, it got crappy. And we were tacking the whole way. And my dad went down below to check something, and he lifted a floorboard, and he had his head in the engine, and the floorboard fell on his head. And he got concussed. And my mom, which I didn't mention throughout this whole thing, she is seasick. So when we're underway, she's not a good person. She will take her watches, but usually the first day or two of a trip, she's still trying to stabilize. But she was a true trooper. She would still take her watches, but this time there was too much motion and she was sick. So here's my dad with a concussion. Here's my mom sick, and there's me up top manning the boat. And before my dad got injured, we went on a tack, and we had the flag. We took the American flag down, and we usually just kind of ball it up and stuff it under something, or you know the little wind scoops on your boat. That's what we had stuffed it in there. It came out, and when we were sheeting in the jib, it fed into the chalk, so we couldn't tack anymore. We were stuck on a tack. He gets injured, so I'm stuck on a tack, just going and thinking, okay, how long before those two are going to be in commission? And I went through the night by myself. There's a little bird that flew up underneath the Dodger because he didn't want any part of that. And I got a little dish of water, put it up there. He ended up dying. So, and I can remember all this because it was like writing all of this in my journal, you know, a couple days later. But the whole down below was just heaved everywhere. And again, I was stuck on a tack, and the only thing I figured is when I see land, I will cut the sheet, tack to the other side to get to where we need to go. Because I knew I was going to have to go over on another tack. But by then, my dad he came up, feeling a little bit better. He cut the sheet, and that's what we said, we need to cut it now. We're going to tack over, because there was a little harbor that we were going to go into. And we were heading towards land. I'm like, Dad, there is no harbor here. And we didn't have charts because we hadn't gotten to Greece yet to get charts. So he's like, there is a harbor. I promise you there's a harbor. I'm like, all right. So we kept heading, and it was like right up until we were on top of land that you could see this little inlet, and we tucked in, and it was like a little calm paradise in there. But we tried to anchor, and it dried. Anchor, dried. And this is probably 36 hours of being awake, and I'm like, I had enough. This fisherman comes rowing out, and he's talking to me in Greek, and I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. And he finally comes and grabs a line, and he starts shaking it. Oh, you want a line? So I gave him a line. He went and rowed back to the land, And I kept feeding line and tying another one off, feeding line, tying another, and he tied it off to a tree. And then he came back out, took another line, and he went and tied it that way. And then he said, now drop your anchor and you're not going anywhere. So we went down below, left everything the way it was, and I just passed out for a while. But it was just things like that, you know, that was probably the worst storm. We did no storm in the middle of the Med, and we got hit by a Meltemi, which is the winds that come off of the Pyrenees mountains. And they come out of nowhere, and that's what they say in the Med, you will lose, no matter what you do, you're gonna lose weight. You're gonna lose at least 20 pounds because you're always up and down changing your sails. You're gonna go from no wind to heavy wind, no wind to heavy wind. And we were motoring, and actually motor sailing, and then all of a sudden, I just saw this foam, like, spraying across the water, and I'm like, Dad, what is that? He's like, holy shit. And he's like, drop the main. And it hit so fast, and we dropped the main, we reefed it. We actually went down to a triple reef. We dropped the jib, and we had a cutter rig boat, so we had a staysail. So we dropped the main, or the jib, and we put the staysail up. But when we reefed the main, the boom that we had, the sheet was triple from the center. And it was tied off, you know, how you out-haul it. We never secured the little lines underneath. So this wind, we got nailed by this wind, and all of a sudden the boom just folded. Snapped right in the middle and folded. So here we are, just like, okay, now what do we do? So we turned the engine on, and we just strapped everything down. We motored into, and this was off the south coast of Spain, motored into a marina, and every time that we tried to pull into a slip, the wind would take the nose and pull it off. So we finally just tossed some lines to a couple of boats, and they pulled us into the slip. So my dad goes and talks to the harbor master there, and he's like, yeah, we can get some guys down to take a look at your boom. So they did. They came down and took a look at it, and they said, we're gonna have to air freight it up to Madrid to be welded, because we can't do that kind of welding here and have it shipped back. What can you do? You have to do what you have to do. So every day, and we didn't have cell phones. We were using operators. You know, we'd go in and get a international operator to get us to the States to talk to somebody. We didn't have mail delivery. We didn't have internet. We didn't have email. So American Express was our friend. And when we wanted to get mail, my brother and sister-in-law would ship packets of mail to an American Express office that we were going to be checking into, you know, a few weeks from then. So that's how we got our stuff. But every day they went to the American Express office, and the most you can get in traveler's checks was $200. So every day they were going and getting $200 in traveler's checks, $200 in traveler's checks. So they air freighted it. And then the boom came back, and my dad was like, okay, we installed it and everything. He's like, how much? And the guy said, so many pesetas, because Spain was pesetas. And my mom and dad look at each other, and I'm looking at them like, $200. And Dad's like, pay him back. So it was $200 to take that boom, air freight it up to Madrid, heliarc welded, and they put a sleeve in there and heliarc welded this thing and shipped it, air freighted it back down. And it was like, all right. So that was kind of a bad news, good news story. There was a lot of times where, you know, we were getting the crap beat out of us. I don't even know if it was I know that there was one time that we were sailing, and my dad and I were taking 15-minute helm watches. I can't remember where it was, but we were in following seas, and the waves that were coming behind us, the ones that would snap, it would just flood the cockpit. So, and we were just fishtailing. We would go down, we'd be doing, 13 knots going down the backside of the wave, and then we would be chugging up, and then all of a sudden the wind would hit the sail and it would just snap them, and so it was really nasty. But we were in foul weather gear, and one of us was strapped to the back side of the wheel, watching the waves, calling out when it was going to hit, and the other one was on the helm, trying to keep the boat straight. And we would switch every 15 minutes because your arms couldn't handle the. So there were really crappy days, but when they were really crappy, you were too busy working through them to feel you had adrenaline rush, but the fear is like, we just got to keep executing. So it was interesting. It was, it was amazing. It was amazing 3 years of my life. And my brothers and sisters, how did you, handle living with mom and dad like that? And I'm like, you guys, yes, it sucked being with your mom and dad. Because there were times that I'd be out partying and, in a foreign country. And I can remember one time, it was New Year's Eve, I met 2 Canadian hockey players. And we were in Spain, and I came home about 4 o'clock in the morning. And my dad, as soon as I jumped on the boat, he came out and he goes, if you ever do that again, don't bother coming back. And I'm like, holy shit. So the next morning he said, your mother was so worried. He's like, we're in a foreign country. How the hell are we going to find you? How do we know? They're not going to give a shit. We're an American citizen. They don't care about us. So he's like, you need to check in. So I would come. It's, midnight. Hey, I'm going back out. I'll check in a couple hours, but I'm going back out. So I would check back in, but bars don't shut down in Europe. So, and any chance that I had to meet somebody my age was, because most of the people that are cruising are older people. But when we came in, there's the people would come and catch your dock lines for you to try and tie you up. And all of a sudden, it'd be older people, and then all of a sudden, people would hear, hey, there's a young girl on that boat. And all these young guys would show up on the dock. And I'm like, good, I got people my age. So, but yeah, and there's a lot of times there was a U.S. military all over. So, military, Navy boats coming in and going. So I was, met. And I met a lot of Canadians, too, because they speak English. So, but every country that we went into, the first thing that I would do is find a bookstore, and I would buy a little translation book. So I'd be walking around, I learned the basic. How much does it cost? Where are the bathrooms? Can I have a drink? So you'd learn the basic stuff, but it was fun.
How much
Your
of the
mother
trip?
had a lot of courage being seasick all the time to go sailing for 3 years?
Yeah. Well, and that was the other thing about my mom. She, when they were planning this trip, she really was not excited about it. But she was going to go where her husband went. And she told him, I will go, but we are going to civilization. We are not going. And most of the people, when they came down, they'd get down to Mexico and they'd head to the Marquesas and go to the Pacific. And then they'd work their way, up through around India and all that.
Philippines.
Yeah, the Suez Canal. Nope, we're not going to where the Aborigines are. We are going to civilization. So that's the reason to go to the Med. And typically when you go into the Med, you're entering it a little earlier, and people spend, 3 or 4 months in the Med and go out. But because we got there late, we ended up a year and a half in the Med, and that was the best time we ever had. So.
How much of the trip was just the 3 of you on the boat and the crossings and so on? Was it just the 3 of you?
Yes. Yeah. When my parents' friends came, they usually would stay 2 weeks. My aunt and uncle, they came to Greece and they spent a week with us on the boat.
The long passages were just.
Oh yeah, it was just the 3 of us. And we did our 3-hour rotations. So 3 on, 6 off. And the first couple of days, the very first day, it seemed like I always had that watch where the sun set and it started getting dark. So, and we were on a regimented eating schedule. Breakfast at a certain time. If you had the sunrise watch, you made a pot of coffee and everybody woke up to it. And whether they chose to get up, but you made the pot of coffee. Lunchtime, whoever was on the lunch watch, would prepare a lunch, leave it on the counter for anybody who wanted to eat it. And then the evening watch, usually my mom and dad were up, we all were up, and they would prepare it. I never prepared it, but I was always the one that got stuck that first night on the watch. They'd eat and just disappear, and I was like, oh, this is the loneliest watch. I hated it. I loved the nighttime watches, the middle of the night on a no moon night. The stars were amazing, and I had my little star chart and my red flashlight where I'd look at the chart and, you know, find all the constellations. But I remember one night we were in the middle, Southern Crossing, and I swear I quit counting shooting stars, and it wasn't a meteor shower because they weren't all coming from one direction. They were shooting stars, and I quit counting at 300. And I was on a 3-hour watch. They were amazing that night. There was another night we were in the middle, the Southern Crossing, and my dad used to get on the radio and just call, you know, to see if anybody heard. Occasionally you'd hear from people, you know, they'd respond and you'd start sharing flying fish sandwich stories or recipes, flying fish recipes, because in that whole crossing, if you shined your flashlight into your sail, the fish would start jumping up on your boat. And you would go around and you had to get them off of your boat fast because they ink. So you would just go and pick the little ones off and keep the big ones, and you know, and we'd make flying fish sandwiches, cutter flying fish sandwiches they call them. But one night I was on a watch and I saw a red light, and I called down to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I see a light. He's like, what? And I told him I see a red light, and he came out. He goes, I'm not seeing anything, and I swear, Dad, it was there. And then other side of the boat, Dad, I'm seeing, and that actually was a green light. I said, Dad, I'm seeing a red light. And he came back up and he saw the red light. He's like, it's a submarine.
It's what?
A submarine.
Really?
So he gets on, and my dad, because he's military, he's thinking, I can just call these guys and they're gonna So he gets on them and he's like, this is Colonel Norman Misha from the Air Force, submarine, you know, that's checking out the sailboat. And they're silent, but every once in a while you get a laughing response, a radio response. And usually when they surface, they're not in radio silence, but you know, when they're at depth, they are. He used to do that to Coast Guard planes that would fly over. When we were in the Bahamas, they'd, you know, be doing a buzz by, and he'd do the same thing. Coast Guard cutter, are you in need of assistance? That's what he does. So, but we did feel, like I said, pretty secure in a lot of the travels because of the fact that, you know, his top secret clearance, the program that he was on, and it's like they knew where he was.
Wow.
So,
Did you have refrigeration? Did you have it?
So we did. We had a little refrigerator with the freezer that's probably 12 by 12 by, you know, 16 inches deep. And when he had a wind vane, but he also, that same motor that operated the wind propeller, you could put it on the back of the boat. He had a mount on the back of the boat, and he had a water propeller.
Oh, okay.
It was on a steel rod with a propeller, and he had like 100+ feet of line that he threw it out. And it would spin and keep the generator going too. And then when we got to port, he'd disconnect that and put it out and do the wind. That's what kept our power going. Now, when we were towing that thing, we were producing too much power. So we would have all the lights on the boat. We'd have every fan running on the boat. And at some point, he would just disconnect the battery wires because, you know.
Did you make fresh water, or did you carry it on there?
No, we carried. We had 165 gallons of water.
For 19 days?
Yeah, and that was the whole thing too. We're going to use half our water supply. But what we would do is to bathe, we would bucket bathe, salt water, take joy baths. That was the big thing, joy baths. And we would bucket water, and then we'd just use a bottle of fresh water to rinse ourselves off at the end. So most of the water was for cooking and drinking, but bathing, not so much. We got used to each other's stink. So, but again, it was always that half rule. We'll use half the fuel and half the water, and then after that, you know, we're now on ration. So,
Any other questions?
Where's the boat now?
the boat is tied at the back of my father's house in Punta Gorda. He
Really?
still has it, but it is in very sad shape. Over the years, as he got older, it was harder for him to take care of it. And those teak decks, as beautiful as they were, all those little screw holes started leaking, and it just kind of deteriorated the decks. So he did have the decks replaced, but it was just too much water leak everywhere, even in the beautiful teak down below. And so this summer, it is being towed to a scrapyard. So at one point, Dave and I were gonna think about refurbing it and doing our own cruising, but it just got too much disrepair.
I'm sorry, did I miss out? How big was the boat? What's the size?
42 foot, passport 42. It was built in Taiwan, teak deck, total teak down below.
Wow.
Beautiful, beautiful boat. So,
Well, Carol, thank you. If anyone is interested in being a speaker at one of our series about something you might have done, see myself or see Jan, we'd love to hear you do something for us. We probably won't do anything again until maybe October, November. But if you really want to do something in May or June, we won't turn you down. So, good. Carol, thank you again. Wonderful.